Welcome to the HR Champions podcast with me, Phil Scott of HR Recruit, where I bring you leaders from the HR community. In our podcast, we'll be discussing their careers to date, their passion for HR, and the challenges they have faced along the way. Today, I'm delighted to introduce Claire Walton, former HR director and high performance coach and author of recently launched book, Super Neuro You. Claire has had a very, very interesting career, so I thought I'd bring her onto the show to discuss her career journey to date. So, Claire, I'm going to pass it over to you. Please give the listeners a brief introduction to who you are.
Do you know, Phil, you did so well. I don't know what to add. Yeah, I mean, I have had, my first career was in HR. I did a lot of interim roles as well. So I've been around a bit, as they say. So HR director for brands like WH Smith's, Carlsberg, Quan. I was corporate change director at Royal Mail Group. I was one of the HR directors at Dixon Stores Group, and so on and so forth. I won't bore you with the rest. But my second career, you're right, is as a high performance coach. And my third career, which I've added to it, although I haven't given up the second one yet. So running alongside high performance coach is best-selling, Phil, best-selling author. As of last week, as of last Thursday, when my book, Super Neuro You, went on sale. So all good stuff. And I'm sure we'll get onto some stuff about the book later. But you know, what kind of connects all three of my careers, if you like, is this desire to make a difference in the world. Started when I was young. I've had it right throughout my career, and I'm just finding different ways to do it.
Okay, so just let's take us back to the beginning of your career. How did you initially get into HR?
Well, funny story. So I didn't go to university because I'm one of those older folk that university wasn't a big thing for us when I was 18. In fact, nobody in my family had actually been to university at that point. So I was an A-level management trainee. Now, Phil, you're probably too young to remember A-level management trainee schemes.
Thank you. I'll take that. I'm not, but I'll take it.
So as a management trainee, you get to, you know, try a bit of various different things out. And I was working for a company that, again, is one that's like gone by the wayside a long while ago, called Fine Fare. So it was a supermarket chain. Having done a bit of everything, I thought two things. One, where can I make the biggest difference? Where can I have the greatest influence in terms of my first role? So, you know, is it kind of like running a deli or the grocery department? No, it's actually being, as they called it in those days, being the personnel manager. Because as the personnel manager, you impact absolutely every aspect of the store. So that's how I started my career. That was my first reason. Being honest, my second reason was it was also the warmest place to work in the entire supermarket because I had an office and a heater. So that was the second reason why, if I'm being, I like to be authentic, Phil. That's the second reason why.
Was that the main reason?
Go on, you caught me out. Yeah, it was probably the main reason. So yeah, that's where it all started. But, you know, joking aside, it was an amazing first career. And starting in supermarket retail was fantastic because after I moved on very quickly from Fine Fare to Gateway, and by the time I was 20, I was working for Asda. I spent 8.5 years, I think it was, with Asda, and I had a fantastic time with them, you know, HR manager in some of their stores, and then regional HR manager in the southeast, then back up in the northeast. Clearly, I'm originally a northerner. And then I actually took some time out of the HR role and ran a couple of stores for Asda as well. And I wanted to get this info because I think it's really, really important. In terms of my HR career, one of the things that made the biggest difference and was really important in terms of my credibility in my more senior HR director roles was the fact that I'd ran a couple of stores. You know, my store budget when I was at Hartlepool Marina was huge. I was running a store that made back then, and we're talking in 1996 and 7, was making £1 million a week. You know, I had 400 colleagues that were working for me. I had 20 managers. You know, it was almost a 24-hour operation back then, 7 days a week. And you've got every aspect of that general management of that store from a management and a leadership perspective to run. And I was in my mid to late 20s at the time. I think I was about 27 or something when I was doing that, and that was my second store after already having the career in the regional HR roles. So that really stood me in good stead for, you know, what was to come in terms of the more senior positions after that.
Yeah, I suppose you understood all the operational aspects and the challenges, you know, of the retail operations.
Well, do you know, I mean, you talk about challenges. Yeah, I know there are other industries that are incredibly challenging, but I'll tell you what, for anybody that's out there working in retail, in any of the roles, you know, you are front facing customers. I mean, I always remember the stats on this because they're in my CV for a long time. You know, 30 odd thousand customers were coming through the store every week, you know, and they're in your face, you know, they're wanting, you know, whatever they want, and they want it right now, and they want it to be, you know, exactly how they want that. And that just experiencing customers so close up. They're not behind a screen, you know, they're not on the end of the telephone, they're there stood face to face in front of you, is a massive pressure. And so yeah, so anyone who works in that sort of sector, or for example, latterly, I mean, I was having a barbecue on Sunday with a friend of mine and client of mine who their organisation is, I think they call it senior living, care homes and so on. Again, I mean, that industry, wow, God, you know, being the HR director in an organisation like that, huge, huge jobs. And, you know, I've worked in various different sectors. I've done finance, I've done logistics, I've been back into retail sort of several times, manufacturing. But yeah, retail was a fantastic way to start, and getting that general management piece. For anybody that's kind of early on in their career that's listening, getting an opportunity to do some significant general management will stand you in good stead for your senior roles in HR.
Super. And what is it that you liked about working in HR?
Well, I know we joked about I liked the warm office with the heater, but in all honesty, I think, you know, for me, and I mean, I kind of grew up in from a HR perspective in the 80s, right? Late 80s, early 90s, and we all talked about, you know, people are our greatest asset, and it's all become a bit twee now, right? But it is about the difference that you can make, and the biggest difference in any organisation is the people, because ultimately without people we're nowhere, and that is not going to change either. You know, we can bring in all the artificial intelligence that we like, but here's two things. The people that bring in the artificial intelligence are people. Yeah, the people who are going to make the artificial intelligence work for us are people. So you cannot get away from it. You know, the difference that having the right sort of people with the right sort of attitude, developing the right sort of skills and applying themselves, you know, 100% their highest potential self, to, you know, every minute of the day, that's such a huge opportunity. It excites me, Phil. You know, it does genuinely, it excites me that you can have such a big impact in that role on these people, who then can have such a big impact on what your organization's doing, and then even the way that your organization does it and the impact it has on the, you know, the communities in which your organization operates. So I talk in the book actually about ripple effect. I've always been really keen on this idea that, you know, if we can do maybe a small thing, if it has a huge ripple effect, it makes a massive difference, and HR enables you to do that.
And in your early career, I mean, you sort of progressed quite steadily and went to HR director level role. How did that go? You know, what was the secret to that progression?
Delivering. You know, delivering what the organization needs you to deliver is always going to be number one. You know, you can talk a good game, but if you don't deliver, you're not going to get on. Not when it really comes to those big roles. So you have to be able to deliver. And when I talk about delivering, I think, you know, one of the things that definitely made a big difference for me is, you know, I focused on the things that make the biggest difference, and that's about, you know, really, nudging your colleagues around organizational strategy, because, how do you know whether or not you're doing the right things in HR if they're not absolutely those things that are enabling the organizational strategy? And all too often in my career, I found that the strategy wasn't clear. So before I would contemplate what it was that we were going to work on in my HR team, I would be, working with my colleagues around getting absolute clarity around the organizational strategy, and then working on the things that will make the biggest difference to help us to deliver to that strategy. And, that's not, for me, there are really important jobs that are still fitting within the HR function around things like, payroll and administration and transactional processes. But for me, I always tried to get somebody who had that particular skill set. It's a very different skill set to, leadership development, organizational development, organization design, culture, etc., which is much more my bag. So I would make sure I had somebody brilliant on all of that transactional side, to run all of that, or outsource it, or get it, under finance or some other part of the organization. I never wanted to build empires. What I wanted to do is make a difference. So you pick the big things connected with getting the most out of people, and you work on those things. And I think I've probably been known for quite a long time as well for being concerned about return on investment. So I didn't go through the traditional CIPD route. I didn't go to university. I didn't get a HR degree. I was a very commercially orientated HR person who was also saw that it was about, the strategic side of the business, that you link then the people strategy to that. And the biggest part of the people strategy is getting your culture right. And the biggest part of getting your culture right is leadership. It kind of like leads on to why I'm doing what I'm doing now, I guess, Phil. But that was always my concentration. But you had to deliver. So return on investment is important. You have to be able to demonstrate upfront the return that you're going to get on the investment that you're going to put in to doing some big things to make a difference, as well as the small things. And then you've got to be able to measure that and, prove it as you work through the various different initiatives that you put in place.
I think that's the conundrum sometimes, isn't it? Is being able to demonstrate, or being able to, whether it's sign off from a finance director or something like that, is actually being able to put that pounds and pence return on investment. Is it any secrets on that?
I don't know if it's a secret or not, but what I used to, and I was reflecting on this last night after you gave me a clue as to some of the questions you might ask me.
Not supposed to say that.
Well, I can't help it, Phil. Speak and think afterwards me sometimes. But no, I think it's, I was reflecting on this and thinking, I remember being in my late 20s and early 30s, and back then, my go-to reading material was Harvard Business Review. So I used to get the Harvard Business Review. Wasn't online those days. I used to get it, and I used to read every single word on every single article in the Harvard Business Review. And I've got piles and piles of them still in my house now, going back to 1990 something. And for me, that was the starting point of my evidence, because I would quote other case studies. So even if I couldn't say, look, well, I've done it here in this organization, or I've done it in another organization that I've worked in previously, and obviously I hadn't worked in that many, when I was in my late 20s and early 30s, I would quote these big organizations that we'd all heard of from the Harvard Business Review. So I would look for those sorts of case studies. The other thing, again, I don't know whether or not it's a secret, Phil, but network. I used to network like mad. I still do. Again, it's probably the secret of any success I might, currently have, is keeping a really solid network of diverse people and organizations and expertise, and feeding off that. And so I could quote what other organizations were doing. I could connect with, well, if you don't believe me, sort of thing, why don't you speak to this person? And of course, I always spoke in commercial terms. Again, that links back to those few years when I was running stores with Asda. So I spoke the language of my colleagues, I guess.
Yeah, brilliant. So quote other people's stats. It's a good point. So just moving it on then to how did you transition into coaching? And I was looking at your LinkedIn profile. So it's you term it's high performance coaching. How did you move into coaching, and tell us what is high performance coaching?
Yeah. So I was very lucky. I tell people when they say to me they're lucky, that's not a good thing to say, because you kind of like, you're not accepting your own skills and stuff. But I also think there's an element of luck as well. It's about whether or not you do something with that. So I was very, very lucky to have worked with some amazing people throughout my 20s. And then in my early 30s as well. And some of those people that I worked with were themselves like leading practitioner coaches. I mean, world leading. There's a guy called Graham Alexander, who was one of the original, coaches. He was one of the original writers about coaching. He wrote about one of the original models and so on. And he was actually my coach at one point as well. I mean, I will never forget sitting in the Landmark Hotel in London, having afternoon tea with Graham Alexander, and him coaching me to, realize some things about myself that were perhaps getting in the way of me being even more successful at that time. And for a 30-year-old, I was pretty successful, all things considered. So I was inspired by people like Graham and various others, and so I had an opportunity in my early 30s to leave the organisation that I was working with, to actually make myself redundant as part of a change programme. And for personal reasons, I wanted to take a little bit of time out. So I further developed my coaching skills and started working alongside Graham and a few other, again, sort of major players in the coaching industry back then. And I actually decided back then that I wasn't sufficiently worldly wise, mature, and capable to work with some really big players and to really do justice to the coaching relationship. So I went back and got a ton more experience in the workplace, alongside a lot more personal development, and then came out again as a coach some years later. I keep kind of like bobbing in and out of it, but I have been doing this now, Phil, for the last 7 years. So not a straightforward route, but very much inspired by some brilliant coaches, being on the receiving end of it, but also seeing the difference they made in the organisations that I was bringing them in to support.
And just staying on coaching, why is it you feel that leaders need a coach? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever be quoted as saying that they need a coach. I'd probably say everybody can benefit from coaching. Okay, I think it's slightly different, because one of the things that I'd like to get out of people's heads is that coaching is like a remedial thing. And when we talk about need, it almost sounds like it's remedial. The best coaching is the proactive coaching. So you alluded to a question there earlier about when you said about high performance coach, why high performance coaching? So for me, my coaching is about making sure that you're always able to bring your highest potential self to any given situation that you find yourself in. So that's the first thing. It's all about self-leadership, particularly with the bulk of my client base are very experienced in terms of both the sort of technical functional aspect of what they do, as well as directors or leaders. The bulk of my clients already are. So they know what they should be doing, but all too often they don't bring their best self to that. They get in the way of what they're actually capable of doing. So a lot of the coaching that I do with my clients is to help them identify with their highest potential self. I talk in the book about superpowers. We all have these superpowers that are in us, but often we're not accessing them. And as a result, we're not, doing our best work. We're not performing at our best. So a lot of what I do is around that. And so it doesn't have to be remedial. Everyone can benefit from a coach in terms of some real basic things as well, Phil. So things like, you know, God, more now than ever, actually. People are so busy. I mean, people don't even describe the world of work as busy anymore. They talk about it being manic. They use that word manic. It's ridiculous if you think about what the word manic actually means. You cannot perform at your best if you are manic. Can you really, Phil? If you're manic, how the hell do you perform at your best? So in the coaching relationship, whether it's with me or any other decent coach, you are going to take some time out to step back, to pause, to reflect, to think at a very deep and broad level. Yeah. To connect with what really matters, both to your organization, your team, to yourself, to find what it is that's getting in the way, to create the conditions for you to operate at your best. And as a result of that, again, here's the ripple effect. If you're operating at your best, so you're delivering your highest potential self, your performance isn't just about your performance, is it? You know, the more senior a leader you are, or an influencer or an entrepreneur, your performance then influences the performance of maybe tens of or hundreds of or even thousands of other people. It's a massive responsibility. So why on earth would you not have somebody working with you, you know, once maybe or twice a month, you know, on a regular basis, to give you that time out to really, you know, step back, pause, think deeply, broadly, and perform at your optimum to have that ripple effect on everybody else's performance. It's nuts that people think it's remedial and kind of like don't feel like it's for them.
And I know we spoke previously about getting, you know, I sort of said to you, do some businesses, you know, they've got a HR director in there who might have experience of L&D, who could naturally take that. But you sort of alluded to actually getting an external perspective and getting someone who's not actually part of that equation to, you know, to be the coach is, you know, is the way that businesses should go. Do you want to just expand on what you meant by that?
Yeah, and it's not about, you know, I want me and the rest of the coaches to get the work, you know, rather than you internally, because, you know, I've been there as a HR director doing internal coaching, and clearly I've been there now, you know, doing it from outside. If you try and do the coaching from inside, it is not about your necessarily, actually, because I want to come on to that, it's not about your level of skill, but the nature of the relationship when, you know, you are, as I have been in the past, you know, the HR director trying to maybe coach the CEO or the MD or one of your colleagues. Yeah. The nature of your relationship is that, you know, there's a power play that's going on there, whether we like to admit to it or not. Yeah. We're not necessarily going to be our most vulnerable selves, you know, with, you know, so if you're the CEO and the HR director, however much you know, feel that they have credibility and skills as a coach, you're not going to be completely 100% going to go there in terms of your vulnerability with them because of the dynamic of the relationship. So I tried to do it. And even though, you know, I was a pretty skilled coach back then, and I had some success with it. Yeah. Now that I see the difference from the perspective of me coaching CEOs, MDs, etc., now it's a completely different thing. You know, people go places with me. They'll quite often say, I mean, I'm not a therapist, but they'll quite often say it's like having therapy, because we're able to really deep dive into some stuff together. And you just can't do that if you're internal.
Do you think they hold back then? So if the CEO is being coached by a colleague, do you think they just hold a little bit back and don't give themselves?
In my experience, and there'll be people out there that will perhaps have a different experience, but certainly in my experience, yes, in retrospect, looking back now, I believe that is the case. When I talk to some of my current clients, they say that, you know, there's no way that they would have had the same experience, you know, had this been internal coaching. And if you just think about the nature of relationships as well, and the nature of human beings, it takes someone who is, I'll give you the example, Phil. I can't coach my partner. I can't coach my daughter. I tried to the other night, actually, coach my daughter, and she just said, Mum, I want you to be mum. I don't want you to try coaching me. Do you know what I mean? It's the nature of the relationship's different. Same sort of thing when you're in an organization as well. But I did want to mention as well skills, because, I was a pretty skilled coach when I was a HR director. So I had some skill to be able to coach people. However, I was a HR director. And so at the time I was, my headspace, if you like, was taken up with a whole breadth of things that I was constantly having to learn in the broad HR world. So I wasn't able to really deepen my coaching skills. I am now a high performance coach, primarily working with exec directors. So, and senior leaders. So if you're an exec director, or you're a senior leader and you want a high performance coach, that's my world. That's what I do. To be honest, as people who know me say, that's what I live and breathe. So the skill level that you eventually get and the experience level as an external, that's significantly different to when you're internal.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's like you say, if you're HRD, you might be coaching 10% of the time. You're coaching 100% of the time, which is easy maths, 10 times more effective. And it's the same in recruitment. We get people that for senior roles, they say, "Oh, we're going to do it ourselves," and you just think, well, if in 2 weeks you can build that network that's taken me 20 years to build up, then what am I doing? Where is my job? And it just doesn't happen. So I'm going to bring it more onto you. So you're coaching people, but you try and stay on top of your own skills. What personal development do you do then?
Well, that's another thing. I mean, I'm huge in terms of personal development, always have been. I wasn't massively academic when I was younger, but I was a 46-year-old MBA student with a whole load of 26-year-olds and so on. Some time back, I'm in my 50s now. But reading constantly. So again, Harvard Business Review is still there. Constantly looking at various different books that I read. I do a lot on audio as well, webinars, conferences. So there's the input side of things, but then secondly, again, my network. I network and collaborate and connect and use all of those words kind of interchangeably, if you like, with so many different people. And diversity, again, is key in that, getting diverse thoughts and experiences to just make yourself keep challenging your own thinking on things. Adam Grant's just brought a great book out called Think Again. And he's an expert in his own field, and I read a lot of Adam Grant's stuff. But again, this latest book of his is fantastic because it's all about using one of the superpowers that I write about, which is curiosity. I'm an incredibly curious person. So I'm constantly challenging whether or not what I learned even 6 months ago is still relevant today. And in the changing world that we live and work in, we have to think like that. We have to be prepared to say what we thought we knew. God, sometimes it feels like last month. What we thought we knew last month is different now. So you've got to keep that open mind. So always curious, always wanting really people to challenge my point of view as well. I love a good argument because you usually learn something from that. And then the final thing I would say on learning is reflection. Taking the time out to reflect on a daily basis. And actually sometimes, I'll reflect after we've done this podcast and I'll say, what have I learned from Phil's questions? What have I learned about myself in terms of how I responded to them? Taking that time out to reflect, to write down those reflections, to pick out the themes and so on. It's a massive part of the learning journey for me as well as with my clients.
Good. And I want to just talk about the book. Firstly, tell us what the book is about, and why did you decide to write a book?
Yeah. So thanks, Phil. So Super Neuro U started a while back with a number of different ideas that I was curating around the desire to write a book. And I wanted to write a book for a number of different reasons, but the book that I've landed on, a couple of things. So I have learned so much over the last few years in particular. So one of the things that I've concentrated a lot of my studies on is neuroscience. And so what I've been learning in terms of neuroscience, I've then been applying to myself, and I've been applying with my clients. And so I wanted to be able to find a way of getting that across to more people, because, you know, not everybody can afford coaching, and not everybody needs to be a director or a senior leader to benefit from the sort of stuff that's in this book. Because a lot of the stuff that comes up in my coaching with these people is, as I said before, it's about self-leadership. Well, you don't have to be in a leadership position to benefit from self-leadership. So the book, in a nutshell, is about self-leadership, and it's using some very practical tools, techniques, exercises, activities that are based in neuroscience and positive psychology in the main. But the great thing about the book is it's a story. Everybody loves a story. We all know the best way to communicate is through stories. So I've combined a couple of things. It's a story about a fictional character, Laura Masters, who happens to be a chief commercial officer in a health foods company. And something has happened in her life that brings her to coaching. You as the reader, you're reading her journal. So again, you know what I said before about the art of reflection. She is in effect reflecting throughout the book on what's happening in her life. It takes her to coaching. She goes to this mad coach, mad being short for making a difference, happens to be me. So you get to be able to read about, so the great thing is, if you've never had coaching before, you get an insight into some of the sorts of things that might happen in a coaching session. You actually get dialogue from coaching conversations that's all based on real coaching conversations that I have with clients. You get to see Laura doing her homework, because all clients always get homework. You know, the real changes happen outside of the coaching sessions. Insight happens in a coaching session. Motivation starts in a coaching session. But actual change happens by doing the homework, by practicing the tools, the techniques, the new approaches outside of the coaching sessions. You get to see all of that as the reader, and you get the opportunity to do everything that I do with Laura to do yourselves, because you get a super secret code in the book that allows you to go on to a super secret area of the website, Leisure Are Mad website, and you can do all of the activities for yourself as well.
And you said it was best-selling. What class is best-selling?
So again, it's all giving secrets away here. You know, he's me giving the secret away about how you prep for these help me prep for this interview, the podcast, and then the super secret code in the book. But so the secret about best-selling is you've got to use your connections, first of all, really well, and do loads of good promo activity to get people on a day one launch, although some naughty devils started buying it before day one, on day one launch, so that you sell enough books on that day to top the charts. So my book, Super Neuro U, topped the charts in Amazon in, it was either 9 or it was 11. Honestly, I don't know. It was a bit confusing on the day. Different categories. So for example, it topped the charts in terms of business coaching and mentoring category, change management. It was above Brené Brown on change management. You know, she became number 2 and I was number 1. Absolutely unbelievable. It was above Simon Sinek. I mean, these are people who I've read about for years. Yeah, it was above Simon Sinek in I think it was business consulting category. It was in a HR and training category, and so on and so forth. So if you go onto Amazon now and you look up Super Neuro U, Claire Walton, I've still got, whether it's Kindle or paperback, the bestseller status. You get like a little flag that says bestseller. And even today, even after the launch day, it's still up there in, I think it's about 5 categories as number 1.
Fantastic. We'll include some links in the podcast notes for the book. So a couple of quick questions, because we're sort of coming up to time. Have you faced any setbacks in your career? And if so, any learns from that?
I think amongst people who know me well and have kind of like been alongside my career for some time, they will say I'm like the resilience queen. Yes, I have suffered many setbacks. So we haven't got enough time we could do a podcast just on my setbacks. But what I will say to you is I have a lovely little phrase that I use with clients, and it's, it's the struggles that we have in life, the difficulties, the derailments, all of those things, that's where we do, if we choose to, another superpower of choice, if we choose to, that's where we get our biggest learning. And so one of the things for me about any of the challenges that I've had, and I've had a couple of big ones, and I'll, again, it's discussion for another day, but things like, being on the receiving end of bullying, even as a HR director, being on the receiving end of sexual harassment, even as a HR director, I've experienced these things firsthand, and they were horrific at the time. But what I say to people is, when you're going through something horrific, whether it's a work-related thing or not, just keep saying to yourself, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? At some point, I am going to benefit from this bad experience. And the second thing that I add to that is this ripple effect again. It massively helps me during any of those setbacks to think, look, if I stay curious and I learn from this, not only can I learn for myself, but I can share that learning with other people, so you get that ripple effect. And that powers me on hugely.
Fantastic. So I'll ask you one other question. You may have covered it, but I'll ask it anyway. What's one common myth about your profession that you'd like to debunk?
Ooh. It probably was answered before, but I think I'd also add in, not all coaches are the same. So I think when people think about coaching, they've probably got some kind of idea in their head. And for some people, they think it's training. For some people, they think it's mentoring. For some people, they'll think that it's, again, it's required, because it's remedial. But it really depends upon the coach. It really depends upon what the coach offers. So identify what it is that you feel you will benefit most from. So again, we get rid of that word need. What will you benefit most from, and who's in the best position to provide that for you? Because my style of coaching, literally, because the training and the qualification, the experience that I have, kind of like starts at the end of therapy. So I'm not a therapist, but there's a lot of therapy inspired techniques that I use. There's some actually in the book. Some of the books, 2 chapters are based on something called IFS therapy. And then it goes all through the various different sort of coaching pieces, right through to mentoring as well. Because I've been there and got the t-shirt in a lot of work situations as well as life situations, it can kind of like span the whole thing. So be open-minded to what it is a coach could provide you with, and what exactly they bring to the table, I guess I would say.
Great. Well, that brings us up to time. So that's just flown by. I had no idea what that was, 35, 40 minutes. But a massive thank you, Claire. I will include the notes to the book, etc., in the podcast notes. But if anyone wants to reach out to you, can they do that? And if so, what's the best way?
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much all of my social media is at so the little @ sign Leaders Are Mad. The website is also Leaders Are Mad, because we leaders are a little bit mad, i.e. making a difference. And also, if you go on my website as well, you can obviously subscribe for new newsletters and so on. But you can also follow me and support. I've got to get this in, Phil. I do a lot for charity as well. Even some stuff to do with the book was for charity. My next charity challenge started yesterday. No sugar treats whatsoever for a year. I'm trying to raise money for my local charity, My Sister's Place, that supports women in particular that are suffering from domestic abuse. And so, yeah, no sugar treats whatsoever for the next year to try and raise money for them. So you can look up about that as well on my social media.
Great. Thank you very much, Claire. Hope everyone has enjoyed this episode of the HR Champions podcast, and stay tuned for more episodes.